2022, 2023 Memphis Grizzlies NBA season preview. Sean, I'm here with my guy, Sean 5K. We're talking about, one of, I guess you can't even call him a league pass darling anymore. They've burst out onto the scene. They are getting nothing but prime time coverage. Shout out to Demetrius Morant. You guys may know him as Ja, high flyer. He has this team on the map with a bunch of complementary young pieces and veterans that make this team into one of the teams it is. So let's get into how they spent their off season. Let's get to that. So basically, obviously, they lost our boy. D'Anthony Melton was traded to the 76ers. Slow-mo signed with the T-Wolves. That kind of makes him a bit of a trader. I'd be interested in seeing that playoff matchup one more time. Yves, your boy, Yves Pons is in France getting to the bag. Ja Morant signed a lucrative extension. Shout out to him. Tyus Jones, a steady work point guard, as we like to call them. Very good backup point guard there. John Conchar, I don't know where they found him, but they've kept him. He's found a way to stick in on this roster. Danny Green, traded, in that deal for D'Anthony Melton. He's on his team. He's coming off that knee injury. Interesting to see what happens with him here. Obviously, they drafted Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, Kennedy Chandler, which, fell to the second round. I think this is an incredible pickup for them. He has the potential to be another steady work point guard on this roster who will be able to run this offense. Everyone's undrafted free agent, darling of summer league and preseason right now, Kenneth Lofton Jr. Incredible when you find out about him for the people who didn't know who he was going into it before his Team USA stuff and things like that. He is not son of Kenny Lofton. I know it's a bit of a mind fuck there, but he is not. He's on this team as well, and I think that's a great fit for them. So yeah, Sean, just looking at some of the additions here, and knowing what we know of this roster from last year. Jaren Jackson's out for a bit right now, but what do you think about this team and the additions that they made?
Fucking Memphis Grizzlies, bro. Obviously one of the best organizations in the league. I'm not even gonna lie. I know even going back to the preview that we did last year for this team, and I'm Raz. You know me, huge fan of the Grizzlies. Like, I'm a fan of the organization. I love all the guys that have this team. I took the under last year, and every time I watched the team, I thought about it. It was on the back of my mind, like, why did I take the under? So stay tuned to the end of this video to see if I take the under again. This year, the Vegas odds. Last year, the Grizzlies were 56-26. Obviously lost in the Western Conference semifinals in that series against the Golden State Warriors. Raz, I do know there's a one contingent on, I think it's on the Ja Morant video, where there was a bunch of Ja fans, Grizzly fans. I don't know what Ja stands are called. I guess that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's not important.
The 12s, whatever. The 12th man, but whatever. There was a lot of people who said, if Ja never got hurt, the Grizzlies win that series against the Warriors. I do not know if I agree or if you share the same opinion with me on that.
Give me 2 seconds to think about that.
But it's neither here nor there. It's just a thought experiment for those watching this and thinking about it. I think the Warriors were just in a different league of the than the actual Grizzlies, especially in the series. But yeah, 48.5 wins is the over/under total for this team. Obviously, just talking about this team and taking a look at the rotation. Obviously, the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury is kind of the biggest effect of why this team could possibly. I mean, obviously, the odds makers say this team's going to win. What would it be? 7-8 less full games than they won last season. So that's a hefty number for a team that's basically bringing back the same core, basically minus D'Anthony Melton and Kyle Anderson. Two important parts of their rotation last season, but not necessarily the guys that were driving the success. So I mean, that's kind of the most interesting part because as somebody who watched the team last year, somebody who, especially during the early portion of the season, I think the actual narrative and the idea of this team being better without Ja Morant, that wasn't necessarily a narrative I was pushing. I was just trying to figure out why was this team playing so good with Ja off the court? And I think the answer to that is one of the deepest rosters in the league. All all the pieces were interchangeable, and the most important part of why I think they were so good when Ja missed, what was it, like 25 plus games last season. I think
Yep.
Jaren Jackson Jr., for all of his, he's not the perfect big. I know a lot of people who have, more of the old school mentality about what they like to see their bigs do. Don't love the fact that he's a perimeter big. He's not the best rebounder. And I know the main criticism of Jaren Jackson Jr. being that he barely averages like 7 rebounds a game. It's always been a dumb argument to me. Not to say that it's not valuable. The game on the glass, having good interior rebounding skills. It's not that that isn't important. It's just what he brings defensively is so much more important and valuable and harder to find when you put things in perspective at the NBA level. It's a reason why he's had success other next to other bigs, whether it's Xavier Tillman in college and actually in the Memphis minutes they spent, Steven Adams, and even Jonas Valanciunas going back the year previously. So defensively, the loss of Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be a super big, interesting, thing to watch. This team was the sixth best defense, according to defensive rating in the year in the league last year. Obviously, a full season of Dylan Brooks, who missed a good portion of last season, might bring them back to, might make up for some of what is being lost with Jaren Jackson Jr. But it's gonna, I think,
Oh
even how it
no.
affects a guy like
I
Steven Adams. Go ahead.
Now I was gonna say I gotta cut you off. Naeem Hines is super concussed. Prayers up to him, but we just put that FanDuel slip in, and
Grand opening, grand closing.
yeah, Grant. I've started him in like 8 places too. All right, but yeah, let's get back to the Grizzlies. I'm sorry.
No, going back, just going back. I mean, because how do you think this team makes up for the loss and just the one portion, or the most invaluable guy on this team? Obviously, Johnson Star, the best player on this team, but I think it's going to be harder for them to replace what Jaren brings to them on defense, and even how important his floor spacing is. So rotation wise, I think they have enough bodies to probably get around it, but impact wise, how do you see them? And I think even as we're recording it, I do think that Jaren Jackson, um, he got a good update on his recovery from the surgery recently. So like they're expecting him back early, possibly like let's say like early December, um, and around that period. But how do you think they're going to make up rotation wise, minutes wise, to start the season without Jaren?
I mean, the one thing we'll say about this team, right, is they're very well ran, and they have the pieces to kind of fill up the holes there. I think Jaren Jackson, obviously, his rim protection and his shooting is something that makes him stand out as a big. I rebuke all Jaren Jackson hate. I know people say he doesn't rebound and he's soft, but I mean that's just not the player he is. I think you have to look
He's
at
not soft, bro. He's not
no,
soft.
he's
He got
not
that dog in
soft.
him, as they say.
He look, he's a shooting big that blocks shots, and people want him to fit a mold that he's not. You know, and to better or worse, he is what he is, and he's a very 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 good player. But Brandon Clark, as we saw, he's able to kind of fill in, and he'll do a bit of everything for this roster. It does change the makeup of this team. He now becomes a lob and roll threat for Ja Morant heading to the rim, but some of that kind of gets into the way with Steven Adams. So I'm interested to see, if they will, you know, go a little bit with like a small ball lineup with Jaren Jackson kind of being out. There could be times where Brandon Clark, for spurts, can play that five. And maybe you'll throw another player in there, like maybe a Ziaire, and move Dylan to the floor and kind of just get out into transition. And I'd be interested to see what type of impact, if any, that do you think like Jake Laravia and Kenny Lofton Jr. can crack this rotation with Jaren Jackson out right now, just for kind of the shooting and the kind of different things that they do that Brandon Clark can't do. And then obviously Michigan State greatest Xavier Tillman is still a backup big. He'll rotate between 4 and 5 there as well. So he look for him to give you some minutes, he can step out and hit it. It is not obviously Jaren Jackson shooting, but it gives them another look.
One time for the one time, we gotta say shout out to Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark is the reason why they won that playoff series. I think they even all things considered, if they did not have Brandon Clark on that roster, I think they're losing that series. He was the one person that the Wolves just had no answer for. And it's like even going back, not to really, it's done and gone at this point, Raz. But Brandon Clark was the only person on it. Brandon Clark and Bane were the two best players in that series. So the fact that they won that series kind of just, even though Klay Thompson, he's calling out gimmick infringement for the strength and numbers things. The depth on this Grizzlies team is the reason why, they are strangely even, prepared to even survive, whether it's two months of no Jaren Jackson on this team. But yeah, shout out to Brandon Clark. It'll be interesting to see what he can do for an extended period as a starter. And just remains to be seen, especially for him, somebody who I believe he is coming up on contract eligible this summer. Do not quote me on that. I believe that is true. So it'll be interesting to see what his next contract looks like. Our teams around the league, projecting him as somebody who can, be a starting four, or is he that third big in your rotation who's able to, still minutes at the 4 and the 5. So really interesting to see because his motor, his defensive IQ, super high level stuff. And somebody who been a huge fan of him going back to his days as Gonzaga as well. But another one of those guys that they're probably going to try and soak up some of those Jaren Jackson departure minutes while he's injured. Definitely somebody who he started a couple of these first preseason games for the actual Grizzlies. That's Santi Aldama. He's one of these guys to where probably a little undersized to actually, play the 5. But he is somebody who brings a pretty interesting skill set. Somebody who has, he's pretty intriguing as an offensive player. I think he's a really good passer. He's somebody who's also going to be able to, I think he's also going to be able to be a actual rim protector. I mean, not rim protector, but floor spacer who's able to shoot it consistently, whether it's catch and shoot. And he has a pretty good movement, actual profile as a shooter. He can also shoot off of relocation and pick and pop. So, I do think he has the size, the athleticism, depending, maybe not so much as a starting big for anything more than 25 minutes, but I think possibly for even 15 to 20 minutes a game, he probably does possess the athleticism to play the 4. A couple of the other guys that you just brought up about year one impact for these guys, and I like we said earlier, Raz, the Grizzlies are just one of those teams to where it doesn't really make sense to question what they're looking at. They kind of have their philosophy and they have ideas about how they're going to, whether it's they like drafting guys who spent 2 to 3 years in college and it's paid dividends for them. Dylan Brooks, Xavier Tillman, they hit on that piece. Brandon Clark, they hit on that piece. Tyus Jones, Tyus was the one done. Did Tyus do 2 years? I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Tyus did.
He might have did 2 years.
Two.
Yeah, Tyus is another one. Anthony Melton is another one. So they found success with those type of players in the past. And David Roddy is another one of these guys to where him and Kenneth Lofton are kind of two swings at, guys who aren't plus athletes but play the game at a high level. Both of them, I feel like, can be thrown into that bucket. David Roddy, throughout his career at Colorado State, he demonstrated that he has the ability to be a positive offensive player. Just in general, he's somebody who he can score around the basket, even though he's not a plus vertical athlete or somebody who has bounce. But his just IQ and feel for the game. He's a great passer, good IQ, knows where to be on the floor, and even if you throw pressure at him, he's pretty composed as a passer. One thing that really did stand out to me watching his game as somebody who really was the hub for his teams at Colorado State, and he was rarely flustered by additional offensive attention on that side. So you put him onto an NBA court aside guys who obviously one of the best floor spacers in the league, in a Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, the star that he is, and the Grizzlies have enough pieces around him to where you're not going to be asking him to do a lot. So he's one of those guys who I just think, whether it's they're trying to hit on, just the Kyle Anderson mode, mold of finding basketball players and not necessarily athletes. One of those guys between David Roddy or Kenneth Lofton Jr., I think they're gonna have a chance to, some long-term viability for Memphis, even if it's as a back-end guy. Even though they took Roddy, I'm not sure what pick that was. I know it was either early 2021 through like 23 for those picks. It's gonna be interesting. Jake LaRavia is another one of those guys that's gonna be interesting to watch for just the Grizzlies, because I think even going back to what we said previously in the Rockets video, Raz, you can use the draft to find your contributors, back end contributors, and glue piece guys. That's one thing that you want to make sure you're doing a good job at, and then you also want to make sure you're getting your high end star pieces, which they also hit on with Ja and Jaren, Triple J. So we just talk about Jake LaRavia. He's another one of those guys. Really good passer, wing defender. I think he's somebody who's also going to be able to come in at an early in his NBA career and really defend. He's one of those guys who, even watching him in college, watching him go against the Duke team in particular, and how he was able to guard a big guy, big forward, such as he was able to guard Paolo and AJ Griffin on varying possessions. So he's one of those guys that's going to be able to bring, and he can shoot. So I think Jake LaRavia is out of all of those young guys that we mentioned, probably does have that chance to just play early minutes for them and just be a solid 3D rotation guy. So we gotta speak about the boy Ziaire Williams, because this just Grizzlies team in general, there's a lot of interesting young pieces that's gonna have a chance to break into the rotation, and they're gonna need them to break into the rotation early. So obviously Ziaire Williams, Raz, one and done nightmare season at Stanford previously, but part of the reason why whenever we get into sample size and scouting these guys and the importance of seeing them in different environments, he didn't look great in Stanford. They were asking him to do a lot, even defensively. I think if you watch him at Stanford, his defense kind of was one of the more consistent aspects of his game. And I do think that actually translated to what he did in year one. He was able to come in. I thought he was spending all of his rookie season in the G League, and he basically spent all of his rookie season contributing to Memphis in their rotation as a guy, as a 19-year-old, basically. So what did you make of Ziaire year one? Obviously, he's another one of those guys, just thinking about more of the corollaries and just analog comparisons between a team like the Grizzlies and a team like the Timberwolves. I think Ziaire has a chance to beat his team's, Jaden McDaniels, to where he has high-level upside. He has, offensive repertoire and the ability to, get himself a basket, the skill set and the burgeoning skill set to create for himself, which are usually the differentiators for any type of star guys. If you have, star potential as a wing, but he's also really comfortable. I think the shot he showed that he's going to be able to shoot, catch and shoot pretty easily in his career. But there's also a different avenue for a high upside for a guy like Ziaire Williams. So what did you make of his rookie season and kind of projecting out these next couple of years for him?
I think he got a lot more shots than I expected him to get, just offensively. Even that defense was kind of what got him to where he is right now, in terms of just how you said he had a pretty much a disaster season his freshman year of college. But the defensive intangibles and the defensive skills is something that made him very draftable, and that upside kind of still be there even after such a down season. So I thought, I didn't think he was going to be a G League player last year. I did think he was going to ride the bench on this roster, but defense got him on the floor, and then he's shown, a little bit of the potential offensively last year in spurts, obviously when Ja was out, in a lot of these blowout games in which he was getting extended minutes. So I think this year is the year that he capitalizes on some of those experiences that he had as a rookie, increase the efficiency on his scoring, become a real knockdown shooter in the NBA, and use some of that length and explosiveness to start finishing better around the basket with his opportunities. And as the defense stays solid, he'll be somebody who's going to be able to play a lot of minutes for this team.
Yeah, so I think Ziaire is definitely somebody to keep an eye out, and I'm definitely I'm a fan of him, and I think his upside is very interesting to watch. Even looking at what he did, he only shot about 51% on his spot up opportunities last season, or points per possession as a spot up guy, which is about 51% for him. So definitely interesting to follow. So I mean, we have not spoke about the face of the franchise too much here, Raz. So I mean, talking about Ja, we got to spend some time talking about Ja. We also got to talk about you know Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, the guy Desmond Bane. Just one of the best shooters. But we'll get to Desmond in a moment. But Ja Morant, Raz, obviously, like you don't need to be a scout to know that guy's a star. Obviously, he continues to take levels up. Last year, obviously made All NBA in his third season in the league, and when most improved, which I don't know, just the criteria and the formula we're using for most improved. He made a damn all-star. I mean, he should have made. He was an all-star level player previously his sophomore season. So, like I said, the leap he took from year 2 to year 3 should have been expected for Ja. If you're watching just the trajectory he's on for this year. So, I mean, year 4, Raz, obviously a huge Ja Morant fan, family business, obviously, but what are your expectations for him in year 4? Where do you see him improving on his game? Obviously, to take that next step. And I mean, just obviously thinking out loud here, and I don't have the odds up in front of me, but just trying to theorize, possible narratives that I could see playing out during this season. That might be worth throwing a pretty piece of change on if they develop that way. But am I too crazy to think there's a world where even like a Ja Morant MVP season is in play this year? Even particularly like if Jared's out early in the season and this team doesn't really fall off at all, the pieces are still clicking. Ja's obviously averaging something crazy like 28 or 8 or 9, and he takes another improvement as outside shooter, and everything is clicking. They have one of the best records in the West. Like, am I making this up here, or is he like a really stealth, interesting, low key MVP candidate for this season?
I mean, the narrative's there, and you can obviously, he's not being spoken with the Jokic's, the Embiid's, Giannis, all of those guys. Luca, of course, it's a very European MVP race we got going on right now. I'm sure I'm sure at your local sports book, Ja Morant, probably some good odds on that. So if you fell into some extra pocket change, maybe throw something on that. But I think the improvements he'll have to make is where is he going to be with that athleticism as a defender in the NBA? I think he has the ability to grow a bit there. He's never, I don't think, going to be a super lockdown defender, but he needs to be serviceable. I think we have to go with that. And then that shooting, nobody can stop him getting to the rim. But I think in terms of a bit of form of self-preservation, that pull-up jump shot is going to be something that will transform him from, it's hard to say. It's funny to say because he's already all NBA, right? But from that, what team was he on, second or third? I believe second.
Second, yeah.
But yeah, the pull-up jump shot hitting that mid-range with any regularity puts him in the air of first all NBA team, and like you said, into the MVP consideration. I think his scoring will jump, and just getting free throws to a place where we feel confident when he's at the line are the kind of just the things holding him back from that superstardom. He's obviously a star right now, but cleaning up those little things will take him a far way.
And yeah, I think even looking at some of what he accomplished last season, going under the hood a bit for his shooting numbers, he shot it at 34% overall, which would be 56 percentile for players overall. On his pull-up three-point shot, he shot 33.8%, which is 68 percentile. So yeah, even you want to see. Obviously, he's not shooting them at the most volume for a guy like that, just because he's able to get to the basket at will. But the improvements he made, he's not a non-shooter, and even down, especially going back to that Wolves series, he hit some pretty big threes down the stretch of those games, where it's just like that's the shot they wanted you to take. He took it and it went in. It's one of those shots you're gonna tip your hat to, and not really get upset about. But yeah, it's definitely. And he also shot 42.3%, 71st percentile on his corner threes this season. So yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see where his 3-point shot stabilizes as he really gets into his prime. So But I mean, Raz, we would be remiss if we're not talking about the God himself, Desmond Bane. Um,
I
who I said
feel
was the best, who was the Grizzlies' best player in that first round playoff series. For my money, I think it was kind of obvious there. He was just an absolute bucket. So the first 2 years of Desmond Bane, obviously, go back, check the archives, Jack Season podcast. You will see us wax poetically about Desmond Bane and how good of a shooter he was coming out, and how we would have both taken him a little earlier than he went. But year three, Desmond Bane, possibly an even more, worthwhile candidate for most improved last season. But what are your expectations for Bane, man? Because we just talk about this team having so much talent, and even young talent. Even though Bane's, a little older, but he still has the best basketball of his career, easily ahead of him. So, what do you make? Like, what are you just making out of watching Desmond Bane? Because I know we both just marvel at how good of a shooter that guy is.
I mean, I don't think we can stop taking victory laps on this one. It was very evident to everyone um on this podcast, so the two of us, that he was going to be a above average to very good NBA player, and it was the shooting, the strength, and the defense. And I think the kind of the knocks on him. Obviously, he was older, and we worried about his ball handling and his playmaking, which he's already proven that that's something he can do on the NBA level. I think running with someone like Ja is also a blessing for him in terms of how he's able to kind of just he's on the scouting report, obviously, but Ja takes up so much attention. Um, it opens up the floor for him, and as the sniper that he is, and he's even shown some finishing prowess in the NBA. I think the sky continues to be the limit for him as he kind of works on improving that finishing and just continuing to be a plus defender because the shooting's not going anywhere.
This Memphis team remains in a really interesting spot. They have a lot of picks. They have the 28th highest payroll coming into this season, so they're hardly, I know the next couple of years, as Jaren Jackson is going to be in a near max, and Ja's obviously going to be on his max contract, so they're going to get a little bit more pricey over these next couple of years. Also, I know Steven Adams just did re-up on a $24 million contract that's going to keep him on this team for until 2024, 2025. What are just your next steps for this actual Grizzlies team, Raz? Because I think obviously as long as they get a healthy, health permitting with guys like Jaren and Ja, this team obviously is going to be in the playoff conversation in the West, whether that's yearly winning a playoff series. But the next jump is the hardest jump to make, going from a team that can win a one playoff series or two into a team that can be a perennial Western a conference finals contended, or going to the NBA finals. So from your eyes, taking a look at this Memphis team, where obviously just how we've spoken about on the past about just organizational philosophy, it seems to be kind of obvious that this Memphis organization knows that they have a really good team now, but they still know that there's additional hurdles to get over in the future if winning a championship is the actual goal for this team. So I mean, what do you see for next steps? Obviously, the elephant in the room, Dylan Brooks is on a $11 million expiring contract this season. So Dylan Brooks shooting for a new contract might put up some fireworks, both good and bad, for the Grizzlies this season. That
Yeah.
might be a show to watch among itself. But next steps for this Grizzlies team, like what do you see as? It still feels like this team has an all-in move that they haven't made yet, despite the early success that they've had. Than you would have signed up for in an early rebuild.
I mean, there's some consolidation that has to happen. You know, obviously, Ja's here to stay. Desmond's probably here to stay. Jaren Jackson is here to stay, and Steven Adams is going to be a part of this team going forward. Dylan Brooks is an interesting piece in terms of, is he a trade piece? Are you keeping him long term? He has, I assume, some value around the league. So I mean, it's probably something you could get something good for if you're willing to attach some of these young players and some picks to. I do think wing would be the way to go. as their all-in move. And it's left to be seen who is going to be put up on the table. And every year there's a star that kind of wants out or that's going to be available. Do will the Grizzlies be willing to part with some of these pieces to get that next level star to run with Ja?
Yeah, it's definitely even going back to the Ziaire Williams aspect for one point because let's say the Grizzlies know they're not gonna re-sign Dylan Brooks, and they know that he's probably playing for somebody next season. And if you follow early season Ziaire Williams and it looks like he's somebody who took an early step, then it's just like we could probably get this guy. We might be able to survive trading Dylan Brooks for a short term piece if we know we're not going to re-sign him. He could also probably be an interesting sign and trade guy in the offseason, probably even if they're not extending him, so they wouldn't be forced to make that deal for a guy like him next season. I don't. It'll be interesting to see who that long term, possible forward type of wing kind of guy could be. I know Chris Middleton is a free agent next season. Is he actually going to be on the market, or will he just resign with the Bucks? Probably seems like he's going back to the Bucks. I know Andrew Wiggins is also on the free agency market this summer. Is he realistically going to be on the board this season? That's another one to where it might be interesting. Even you probably have to go into next season to look at guys like maybe like Jaylen Brown or even like a Pascal Siakam who could be unrestricted free agent next year. That could probably be the missing piece for a possible wing, or the Grizzlies could find themselves in the trade market. So definitely a lot of things to watch for this Grizzlies team. It's going to be interesting to see. I think there is kind of some baked in regression for the team just for losing Jaren Jackson for probably more than 20 plus games, unless we just see a scorched earth version of Ja, which like we did say earlier, I see it as a realistic possibility for this team. So wrapping up on the Grizzlies here, Raz, 48 and a half wins. What are you feeling?
This feels like a 50-win team with health. Um, I think it depends on that, like you said, that early Ja's portion of the year with Jaren being out. But 40 and a half, how many they win last year? 54?
Yep.
Uh, oh no, they won
56
56
actually.
last year.
56.
I mean, a 6 game regression is still a 50 win season. So I'm willing to hit the over here.
Yeah, and especially like if they get, I think especially since we got some good news, I'm taking the over as well. At this point, I just don't think it's good money to bet against the Grizzlies, even though I see some possibilities that can go wrong for them. But in terms of young player growth, next steps for a lot of those young guys, I expect a better version of Ja Morant. Ja also missed 25 games last season, so if you get a full season of Ja Morant on this team, plus a lot of the secondary pieces, supporting cast guys that this Grizzlies team have. In addition to, let's even say you're getting Jaren Jackson back for the next 55 to 60 games if he's healthy by like New Year's Eve, the start of 2023. Yeah, I think this team finds a way to win 50 games. Taylor Jenkins is one of the most underrated coaches in the league, especially when you get into in-game strategy and the ability to play different rosters. So yeah, I'm rocking with the over for the Memphis Grizzlies this year. Like I said earlier, just because I don't want to have to deal with any pain watching them, because I enjoy watching the Grizzlies play on a day-to-day basis. But Raz, it's gonna wrap us up. You can take us out of here, G.
Yeah, man, this is the draft season podcast. We will be back with more NBA team previews. The NBA season is fast approaching. I have already secured and procured the NBA League Pass. We are locked and loaded on this side. Please leave comments, subscribe, likes, 5 stars on anywhere you are listening to this. We are running up the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll be back with more content very, very shortly.